It's the Mike Missanelli podcast on the BetRivers Network.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Mike Missanelli podcast, episode number 57, Tuesday, February 28th, final day of February. We're in Philadelphia. We still haven't had a snowfall. I'm kind of okay with that. However, I like using my snowblower, so I'll take it either way. If there's a snowfall that coming in March, my damn snowblower is ready for it, and I'll even do the neighbors. Anyway, coming up in a bit, a visit from Sixers beat writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer, my buddy Keith Pompey, who in Monday's Philadelphia Inquirer didn't seem too optimistic about the Sixers championship chances. We'll talk with Keith about that. And later in the show, I will discuss an email sent to the GM of 97.5 The Fanatic on why I didn't receive the same congratulatory plaudits that WIP gave to Angelo Cataldi last week as he stepped down from a 33-year career. And I'll have a little bit to say about what the GM sent back to this emailer. So we will be reading some emails and tweets a little later in the show. Of course, this whole thing is brought to you by BetRivers, where we've got this contest going right now. It's called Mike Missanelli's Pickadelphia. That's right. There's no app you have to download. It'll cost you nothing, and all you have to do is go to this website, BetRivers4free.com. That's BetRivers, the number 4free.com. And this contest goes through March Madness. It involves all Philadelphia area basketball and hockey teams: Sixers, Flyers, Villanova, Temple, Penn State, Rutgers, Drexel, Penn, LaSalle, St. Joe's, and also Philly area athletes competing in individual sports. And you can easily win a $100 gift card for getting the most correct picks. All you have to do is go to the website and find out what this is all about. Mike Missanelli's Pickadelphia. We've already had one winner of a $100 gift card. His name is Dakota Johnson. Not the Dakota Johnson that was in the Shades of Grey, who's spectacular, by the way. But Dakota Johnson, who's a male, and he's a Mike Miss podcast listener, Philly fan, currently living in Michigan. So congratulations to Dakota Johnson. All right, let's get started today. What's on my mind? We're going to start with a little spring training because the Phillies, I've been watching the Phillies on television. The games are starting to be televised. And Sunday, of course, the big highlight, Trey Turner gets in the box, bang, bang, couple knocks and a stolen base. And by the way, I'm loving this pitch clock thing. It is making the games a lot quicker. And I know there was a big controversy with the Braves losing the game because the guy wasn't in the box looking at the pitcher with 8 seconds left. And it was the winning run that crosses the plate. And people say, well, what do you think about that, Mike? I think it's outrageous. I go, that's the perfect time to do it. You get these guys used to this whole thing. Don't screw around, all right? It may cost you a game. It's better to do it in spring training so people are really concerned about it and they won't dare make a mistake like that once the regular season starts. All right, so let's. Here's the problem with spring training, is that you're not. The Phillies are a good team, so there's not much intrigue on what you're seeing with other guys. Like, you know what their starting team's going to be. Those guys are going to play a couple innings, a couple of bats. They're out. So from inning 5 on, you get a lot of guys wearing number 78. And nobody really cares about the guys wearing number 78 because there's no spots open, really. There's only so many times that I can see Weston Wilson at bats. You know what I'm saying? And pitchers are going 1 inning, get tuned up, and later in spring training it gets more exciting because pitchers get stretched out and the whole thing. It's not that exciting right now. I did see something that was fairly exciting during Sunday's telecast. They shoot a lot of people at the Phillies spring training stadium. I forget what it's even called now. It changes every year what they call it. But there's the berm out there and maybe on left field. And people lay out there. They sit down on the berm. And I saw something that was very interesting. There was a woman who decided that the berm was like a beach. You know, women on the beach, they lay on their stomach and they unhook their bikini top so they get some tan on their back. A woman was laying on the berm on a blanket trying to get a little suntan like it was a beach. Like if a home run comes her way, people go, look out, heads up. And she has to get up. On the beach, you get away with it. I don't know. The berm with a bunch of kids out there in the family. I don't know. I had to question her choice there on why she decided to unhook the bikini top on the berm. But that's getting beyond what we're going to talk about. The Phillies are going to be fine. I mean, they're a good squad. All right, Reese Hoskins is going to get back. We got to wait for Harper. But Trey Turner is worth the price of admission. He's going to be at the top of the order. I'm going to really enjoy watching the Phillies, but it's early in spring training, and it's really tough to really see anything because, again, you get the 78s and the 86s that are out on the field. You got guys double A getting a couple at bats, whatever. And I get it. Sometimes there's an intrigue in seeing those guys, and sometimes there's not because the Phillies are a pretty complete team. Those guys aren't going to see the light of day. All right, let's touch on a little football. Because as soon as the Super Bowl ends, boom, here we go again. The Combine begins this week. And it's always interesting. The Combine's always interesting for a lot of people. It's interesting for me. I watch the NFL Network, and I watch all these events and the 40-yard dashes, 60-yard dashes, and things like that. I kind of like it. So here's what the intrigue of this Combine is going to be. It's always about quarterbacks, right? Now, there are 3 draftable quarterbacks right now that are at the top of the heap. Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud from Ohio State, and Will Levis, the kid from Kentucky. But the one guy that's going to be the darling of the Combine, predicted by everybody, is the quarterback from Florida named Anthony Richardson. And I guarantee you that somebody's going to overvalue this guy. It's just like you're so desperate for quarterbacks, you have a tendency to elevate quarterbacks beyond anybody else. Like Mitchell Trubisky can't play dead. And he got elevated because of the Combine, and people had to have Mitchell Trubisky, and it was a disaster. You can draft Mitchell Trubisky for crying out loud. Bryce Young, the flaw on him, and he's only going to measure out as 5'10". So now you get to C.J. Stroud, who's bigger, but they say the arm strength is not quite the way they like it in the NFL. And then you get Will Levis, who's a big kid who's got some mobility, and they're going to draft him on his arm. But then also this Anthony Richardson guy comes in. And guarantee they're going to evaluate that guy and push him ahead of one of these 3 guys because somebody thinks they're smarter than somebody else. Now, as far as the Eagles go, you can watch the Combine for the Eagles picks. The later picks, you're going to see somebody you're going to notice. Right now, I think they're going to trade the 30th pick. They're not going to trade the 10th pick because I think with the 10th pick, they're going to give a cornerback value. There are 2 corners they could take. Of course, the one I think is the better cornerback is Joey Porter because of his physicality. I think at 10, that would be a great selection. However, at pick number 30, it becomes intriguing for the Eagles because the best running back in the draft is probably going to be there at 30th. Bijan Robinson from Texas, right? If he's there at 30, you can't go wrong. If you come out of the draft in the first round with Joey Porter, Bijan Robinson, I'm okay with it, right? They're probably going to trade that pick. But I would really be tempted if he's going to be there to go cornerback, running back because they need the running back. And that kid's a stud. Now, I don't think they'll do that, but that's the way I'm looking at it. I'm going to be very interested to see Bijan Robinson and his workouts in the Combine. All right, let's move into the Sixers. So an interesting little tweet about the Sixers and their game against the Boston Celtics. It was from a guy in the media, a guy who does sports talk radio. I might as well just name him. He's a guy. His name is Mike Gill. Now I know Mike. I've been on his show a few times. He does a talk show in Atlantic City on 97.3. So if you're down there, you'll hear him. It's called the Sports Bash. He puts a tweet out there saying, well, it's the Sixers lost, but they closed the gap on Boston. And they go, what? They close what? What gap are we talking about? What do you mean by they closed the gap on Boston? The only thing that matters is not the gap. The only thing that matters is whether they can beat Boston 4 times in a playoff series. Or Milwaukee, for that matter. It doesn't matter how they close the gap. What are we trying to earn some points here? Are we going to go to Dave & Buster's and get a better egg slicer? Like, what are we talking about here with the close the gap? What does that get you? A cup of coffee? That doesn't mean anything. They closed the gap. They lost the game. It was a 3rd straight loss to Boston, and they can't beat Boston in a 7-game series. The Celtics are better. They're longer. They defend better. They have 8 reliable rotation players. Sixers don't have 8 reliable rotation players. I mean, my God, they're a good team, but I don't believe they're good enough. And maybe I'm wrong, and I hope I am wrong. The other 2 contenders, And you can go down the roster themselves, right? Go down the roster. You need 8 players in your rotation, at least. You're going to play 9 occasionally. You need 8 solid players. And the Celtics and the Bucks have 8 difference-making players in their rotation. And the Sixers just don't. And I don't want to pick on this guy, but there is not, if you look at Boston, Milwaukee, there is not a George Niang on either of those teams. I mean, listen, I know it's bang, bang, George Niang. For me, it's bang, bang your ass, all right? Because George Niang is not going to give you what you need as far as winning a conference as your viable guy off the bench. I'm sorry. I'm used to seeing athletic players who are long and do a few things. And I go, Jesus, what's he do? And people love him. Because he's gruff. He gets in people's face. I know he's the Philly athlete that people love, but there's not a George Niang on Boston or Milwaukee. And so, I don't want to reduce it to that much. And here's the other thing. People say this all the time. Well, as long as and you'll hear pundits talk about this too on national TV. As long as you have the best player on the floor, you've got a chance. No, you don't. Joel Embiid clearly is going to be the best player on the floor. You can't win with just Joel Embiid. He can't play 48 minutes. He can't give you 50 and 20. He's not Wilt. So the bottom line is you need a subordinate cast that could really facilitate you advancing and winning 4 times. Again, it's 4 times you got to beat a team, not once. Yeah, the Sixers can go to Boston and beat Boston once. They can beat them here. They can beat Milwaukee. 4 times you got to beat them. And you're not going to have home court advantage on either of those series. So, I don't want to sound a death knell because anything is possible. And I hope the Sixers catch a wave and are going to be able to do that. But let me just go down some bullet points before we talk to Keith Pompey. The backup center position is still in flux. They still don't know what they're going to do with it. He doesn't. Doc Rivers doesn't know what to do with it. He's trying to waste some minutes. They're eminently worse without Embiid on the floor. So you got to kill some good minutes with a backup center. And Montrezl Harrell and Paul Reed aren't adequate enough. So hopefully Dwayne Dedmon is when he plays. Maxi's lost a little confidence. Not the Maxey that we've seen, the dynamic Maxey who can light up a scoreboard. He's not bad, but he doesn't have the same confidence. And being moved out of the starting lineup maybe has changed him a little bit. I don't know what it is, but he's got to figure it out. Tobias Harris, good player. Sometimes we'll get, he made some big shots the other day, but he still hasn't truly assimilated in the offense on a regular basis. He'll disappear for 10 minutes at a time. You won't get a basket from Tobias Harris. What other contenders are going to be short in a rotation? And I'm only measuring them against 2 teams. Yeah, they're better than probably everybody else in the Eastern Conference, but they're not right now better than Milwaukee, and they're certainly not better than Boston. And that's a shame. It really is.
Listen to the entire Mike Missanelli podcast on Apple Podcasts or from your favorite podcast provider. Thanks for listening.